Welcome to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. Like any good marriage, we will debate, evaluate, and sometimes quarrel about how privacy and security impact business in the 21st century.
Hi, Jody Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and certified informational privacy professional providing practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hi, I'm Justin Daniels. I am a shareholder and corporate M&A and tech transaction lawyer at the law firm Baker Donaldson, advising companies in the deployment and scaling of technology. Since data is critical to every transaction, I help clients make informed business decisions while managing data privacy and cybersecurity risk, and when needed, I lead the legal cyber data breach response brigade.
And this episode is brought to you by Red Clover Advisors. We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, e-commerce, professional services, and digital media. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there's greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more and to check out our best-selling book, Data Reimagined, Building Trust One Bite at a Time, visit redcloveradvisors.com. Well, hello. You're very excited for a Friday recording time.
I'm just getting the vibe from your positiveness.
That's because it was fall weather this morning. After it was 85 here the other day, to wake up and it be 55 was awesome.
Yes, I noticed you're not complaining about the HVAC today.
We'll have an entire conversation. If anyone here has to replace their HVAC, I have a lot of thoughts about the options on the market. That we probably should talk about privacy instead.
Okay.
And security and AI. So today we have Eric Greenberg, who is the Executive Vice President, General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary of Cox Media Group, a multi-platform media company based in Atlanta that serves major U.S. media markets. And CMG, Cox Media Group, is a portfolio company of the private equity firm Apollo Global Management. Eric, we are so excited that you are here with us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited. I know both of you separately. I'm excited to be here with both of you.
Let's see which one he likes better by the end of the podcast.
And Eric, if you don't know the answer to that,
I'm gonna. We'll edit that.
You know exactly who the better podcast host. Just like when I speak with her, I tell them up front when you fill out the survey form, you know who the better speaker was.
I will keep that. I note to self.
Yes, thank you.
That's your turn.
Thank you for that. How many of these have we done?
I think
500.
We're like 250 or something.
Okay. Eric, can you tell us a little bit about your career journey?
Sure. So I began my career in private practice. I've practiced in Washington, D.C., and really focusing on deal work. And because I was in Washington, I really focused on deal work in regulated spaces, particularly media and technology. And then about 4 years ago, I left private practice to become GC of CMG. It's my first stint as a GC, but I knew the industry and the regulatory regime well. So it was a good fit, but also a lot of new things. And I've loved it and glad to be here.
So I want to ask you actually a follow-up question because I am also a fellow deal lawyer. And given that our topic today is AI, kind of from a legal and legal industry standpoint, could you talk to us a little bit about why being an M&A or a deal lawyer is so helpful in understanding AI, which is such a connect the dot type of issue across so many disciplines in the law?
Well, it's interesting. I think M&A is really one of the entry points for legal AI tools because its ability to streamline due diligence and to translate vast stores of documents into due diligence reports, schedules, to match them up against the reps. There's a tremendous amount of efficiency there. But I do think the broader issue is in understanding what the risk profile in a deal is, what the negotiating posture of the other side is. I think there's a whole other level where you're using the pattern recognition skills, not just to sort of understand a universe of documents, but to understand sort of the universe in which the deal's happening. And I think people aren't quite there yet. I've sort of dipped my toe in that in a couple of deals, sort of understand what the mentality of the other side was, or to think about strategies. And I think that's one of the really exciting and more far-reaching areas.
Eric, you recently put out your last article in a multi-part series on Bloomberg Law about general counsels and AI and the impact of it on the legal profession in the future. And I was hoping you could start by sharing a little bit about the series and the articles and sort of your thoughts on this future shift.
So it's hard. It's particularly this year, it's been hard to avoid AI, whether you're looking at LinkedIn or you're reading more broadly and in our own work. And, we're all, hearing about demos for this technology and that. And I was on a long flight and really just started to think about different elements of the topic and what the ramifications were. And that kept turning into yet another issue and another issue. And I began to just write and wrote something very dense, very kind of multi-perspective, sent it to an editor I know at Bloomberg, and basically, like, this is too long, but if there's a there, let's talk about it. And she came back and said, there is, it is too long, but maybe we can turn it into a series. And that also became a really fascinating challenge about how do you break this topic up so that you're meaningfully covering the waterfront, but also in ways that are digestible. And I think the fact that we put this out sort of one article at a time, a week at a time, I hope create an opportunity for people to see different issues from different perspectives and digest that, and then approach it another way. So it was a really fascinating project. The feedback and meeting folks like you in the process and engaging in it has been really fascinating. And as I've mentioned when we spoke earlier, I really ended up having to rewrite some of the content towards the end because I was myself learning and evolving in my own thinking. I wrote something on AI earlier in the year on Bloomberg, and I have to say it feels quite quaint now that we're in October. My own thinking's evolved a lot, and I expect it will for all of us. But that's I hope it provides a good snapshot in time of where we are now, what the issues are, and I put myself out there making some predictions, and who knows. But I think it's a useful exercise to think about this.
I also love that you can recognize and appreciate the views might change and shift. And I see that in our work. And when I'm talking with people as well, what we know now and what you might know in the future is going to change. So that continuous learning and being open-minded, I think, is really important.
Well, I think ironically, it's one of the great attributes of AI is as a thought partner and to think incrementally and iteratively. And if you're doing that, you're going to end up at a place different than where you started or where even you thought you were going. And that's very much been the case for me in writing about AI.
So I know in your series, which I've read several of the articles, you explore how AI transformed the legal practices. So maybe share with us a little bit from your perspective about the ethical or professional risks you foresee as more legal work becomes automated. In short, how should GCs and legal teams prepare for this sea change in how lawyers deliver value?
I think at the end of the day, our bread and butter as lawyers is our judgment. And there are a lot of components to that, not only our legal training, but our training to identify material issues, to ask the right questions, to explore an area we're unfamiliar with, and through logic and material questioning what the material issue is and sort of taking apart an issue. That's really what we do as lawyers, and I think we're going to have to continue to do that. What AI gives us is, yes, some efficiency in doing some tasks faster. And I think that's a huge emphasis right now. I do not think in the long run that's really the game changer. I think the game changer is the ability to use it as an iterative thought partner. But in either of those cases, we're going to have to apply our judgment to what the outputs are. And so, just as, when I was coming up, you could go online and search for a case using keywords that were within so many words of one another and think you found a case very much on point. You still had to read it. Still had to think about whether it really applied. You had to shepherdize it, make sure it was still good law. I think hallucinations are simply just another variation on that. It's going to get us to interesting material faster. It's going to get us to potential answers faster, but we've still got to apply our judgment to that. And even on the thought partnership piece, I don't think this is like, the bat computer where you put in a question and it spits out on a computer tape what the answer is. It's going to spit out things. Those outputs need to be inputs for us. And we need to treat them that way. Not that the answer has been issued, but that an input for us to analyze and discern and think about and potentially discard, and I think often build on, is really the task before us. And I think that's going to be the distinction between irresponsible use of the technology and not just responsible use, but really strategic use of it. And I think the irresponsible use is also going to be really non-strategic as well. So I'm hopeful that divide leads people to be on I think the more responsible and what I think is the more creative side of the equation.
I have a follow-up, but Justin, you have your pensive thinking look on.
I'm going to pass the con to you.
Okay, then. Eric, I agree with what you said, especially in terms of the value of asking those really strategic questions. What comes to mind for me is I think so many non-legal executives see the efficiency piece.
Yeah.
And their view is, well, if I can get that from these tools, let me move fast and forward there. What are your thoughts to help legal professionals and teams educate and remind, here's why just that alone won't be enough?
I think there are always business executives who don't appreciate what lawyers do, who see us sort of as a passive reservoir of expertise to be, to open the floodgate when needed and only then. And I think that framework will also lead people to say, well, why can't I just, look this up, or let's hire a first year who has, good prompt engineering skills. That's the whole legal department. And I think there will always be that mindset in certain quarters. I do think not only is that naive, I think it's becoming quickly antiquated. And I think the real opportunity for GCs and for the business community and for corporate America is that the GC's role is becoming increasingly strategic. And I think the real substantive view is not that AI can produce the right answers quickly and dispense with lawyers, but that it actually allows lawyers to be even more strategic. I had thought earlier in the year that the strategic aspect was that AI would free up more time for us. By doing a lot of tasks more efficiently and quickly, we would now have more time to be strategic. My thought has evolved that AI is part of the strategy. It's not that it frees us up, that we're able to make dinner faster and read a book. It's that it's actually going to accelerate our own ability to be strategic. And I think ultimately it will elevate general counsel. I think if you look at the finance department, the technology is already there and well developed. They've got their Excel spreadsheets. They're doing complicated financial structuring. I think the real innovation now in 2025 and forward is that large language models, which are really addressable to lawyers who language is the coin of our realm, that we now have a really potent technology to help us be interdisciplinary, to be strategic, to pull together diffuse and sometimes contradictory information. We do that better than anybody. And I'm hopeful that AI is actually going to enable us and elevate us in the C-suite rather than the reverse.
So, Eric, on that point, I've done about, I don't know, 5 or 6 workshops with in-house counsel around prompting, because that's how you interact with the LLM. And what I've seen is you have in-house attorneys who are all over the place. Some of them are very savvy with it. Many are dipping a toe in the water or trying to figure out, because the key to really unlocking the power of AI is the prompting and understanding the nuance. And so I guess my question is, it sounds to me what's underpinning your thought around how this evolves into a really strategic use is that most in-house attorneys will really develop a strength in the skill of prompting, or whatever it evolves into next, in how you engage with the AI, because prompting is an art. I've had to learn a lot about how to prompt well and how to, AI likes to be friendly and give you what you want. You have to be hard on it to a lot of times get what you want and parse through the hallucinations. So I'd love to get your take around that.
Well, I think it's a really great and multi-layered question, because I think one of the things we reflexively think is it's all about speed and doing things faster. And part of what's embedded in your question is you have to put in a lot of work into the prompt for it to be really effective and to get the most out of it. It can't just be, and I do this sometimes, if I'm personally using a tool, I'm just lazy and say, what about X? And who knows what answer you get. But when we're using it to be really strategic, the more information the tool has, the more useful it's going to be. But we also have to really guide it. The second piece of it, and when you focus on prompt engineering, I fully agree. And I think that's frankly an opportunity for younger lawyers. I think they, by dint of their own facility with technology and perhaps a certain fearlessness that older people, particularly older lawyers, may not have, I think they are going to get far and fast in prompt engineering. But what they may lack, and what's essential, is the judgment, seasoning, and experience to do something interesting with that output. And what I envision, perhaps with more hope than prognostication, but I definitely see it in my mind's eye, is the potential for young lawyers and more seasoned lawyers to have very rich partnerships, where a younger lawyer, rather than sort of being a passive observer of a litigation or of a deal where I'm doing the schedules, I read the documents, this is my introduction to the deal process, which, that's how you and I learned to do M&A. I think there's an opportunity for younger lawyers to be even more engaged in the strategy, but they're going to need to be partners with more senior lawyers. And I suspect senior lawyers are going to need younger lawyers who are really fearless and facile with AI to be partners with them. And I think that creates a great opportunity for truly strategic and substantive mentorships. Obviously, the conventional wisdom is that it could displace training and that people are going to, be sitting in a remote corner with an AI tool and not getting training. And I think that's a risk. But I also think there's a huge and very rich opportunity for prompt engineering to be a real tool to make lawyers on an intergenerational basis collaborators.
Well, kind of in a similar vein, and now I'm talking business models, is I use AI on deals and all the places where I think it makes sense. And I try to do it proactively because I don't want someone such as yourself to come to me and say, hey, Justin, what are you doing as my outside counsel to, integrate AI into your practice? And so I'm just, from my own outside lawyer's perspective, what is your thought around the expectation you have around the outside lawyers that you use in terms of how they bring AI to bear and how that may impact what you're willing to pay for outside legal services?
So I think the threshold issue is about efficiency and cost, and I think everybody is there. that AI ought to enable people to do a lot of things faster, and that it ought to change the value proposition. I certainly am intrigued by AI-enabled firms. Udia just announced that it had a law firm offering that in all likelihood can do due diligence in a deal and generate due diligence reports faster and at a much lower cost. And I certainly am seeing fellow GCs looking to outside counsel saying, I expect to pay less for this. And I think law firms that are touting their AI capabilities without translating that into savings or some value proposition are on the wrong side of history, if you will. Having said all of that, I do think that the longer term potential is for AI to be a tool for collaboration. And I think that some of the real opportunity is for the AI tools that are being used by the law firms to be interoperable with the AI tools that we're using in-house. And I think, frankly, whoever figures that out, rather than focusing on big law or on the in-house market, but sees collaboration between the two as the market, I think that's a huge opportunity. And that's where I'm looking in the long run, is if I'm doing a deal or I'm doing a litigation, can we be collaborating and creating a universe of knowledge that we both have access to, that we're both contributing to, and that we together can take those outputs? Because I was saying before, you want to treat the output from the AI tool as an input to you for your judgment. All the better to be doing that with your outside counsel, with their experience. They may have vaster deal experience and know the market. We as in-house know our companies and our industries better. I think AI becomes an incredible tool for collaboration, and that's really where I would like to see it go. What that value proposition looks like in terms of fees, I think is a lot less clear in that context, but I think we do start to approach a more value-based model, rather than saying however long it took to do it is a crude approximation of value. And so that's what we'll do. I think the billable model has been highly resilient. And it's sort of like the dinosaurs. Everybody, announces extinction and that they hang on for a very long time. But I do think the billable hour in a world where the collaboration is more dynamic, the efficiencies are more pronounced, is going to be under higher pressure. And I think we're going to move closer to something that is perhaps still influenced by the hourly rate, but is going to be much more rounded by notions of value.
One of the pieces, Justin, you talked about prompting. Eric, you're talking about value and the ability to jointly collaborate. To make any of that work is all about the data that is there. So if we think about, and you talk a lot about this in the series, embedding institutional knowledge in AI systems, if you could, and this is especially true in the collaboration, who moves on, what happens, so that information is still there. But again, input in really helps dictate, plus a quality prompt, what kind of output you're going to get. Can you talk to us a little bit about the risks and trade-offs of kind of this concept of like a corporate legal memory and your thoughts there?
I think one of the opportunities, as with many things, is also the risk. The opportunity is having, I think, increased sort of uniformity, cogency, really, in terms of how we think about deal making, risk, our advice, by having everybody drawing on a common body of knowledge. In the series, I quoted another GC saying, AI has a lot of risks. There's also a risk by having a lot of lawyers in your department all doing their own thing. And I think this kind of corporate mind dynamic brain creates the potential for there to be a lot more coherence in the way we attack issues, that we execute deals, prosecute a litigation, or defend it. I think it also creates a lot of opportunity for the GC to have influence. I mean, I became GC and I put my forms online and encourage people to use them. This sort of takes that to the nth, to be able to really influence this dynamic system of knowledge that is going to influence how we do these various tasks. The risk, Jody, I think, is people sort of rely on that in a very passive way rather than seeing it as dynamic and engaging with it. Particularly in the deal world, we're very precedent driven. Everybody wants to start with a form. Somebody must have thought about this, and I'm going to start with that form. And look, we all see in the world people who are over reliant on their forms. Young lawyers are often overly reliant on their forms. Corporations, in-house counsel, I can't change this word because the semicolon was approved by corporate. And people who sort of use it as, well, my form is market. This is I'm not going to move off of it. That's still going to be a risk. And there's a risk, I think, that people say, I'm going to use this brain as a forms file, and I don't have to think a lot about this because I have the answer. And I think that misses the point, because I think the real value is that this thing is dynamic and continue to evolve. And so just as, we talk about our living, breathing Constitution, it's only as good as our ability to sort of apply it to new circumstances. I think that's what's going to behoove us as users of this technology, is to be really engaged with it as a starting point, but we're going to have to adapt a risk profile from another deal into a different context. And I think there's a risk that it makes people lazy, and people's thought process starts to atrophy. And that's always been a risk. In the 1950s, Ray Bradbury wrote about, people not reading, and sort of just becoming incredibly superficial in their thought processes. 75 years later, that risk is still here, just based on new technology and new medium. And I think that's true for lawyers as much as anybody else. But it also, I think, becomes an incredible tool for thinking strategically and seeing patterns, risks, theories of a case that might not have been readily discernible to us. Now, we still have to apply our judgment. And frankly, our judgment may not even be better than the tools. But at the end of the day, we have to be the ones controlling that output. And to the degree that people hand over the keys to, Hal to control who closes the pod bay doors in 2001, that's was a risk then, it's a risk now.
That makes a lot of sense. I have lots of other thoughts that come to mind. I know we were talking about legal forms, but the only thing I could think of were the health forms, where they still have the information from 20 years ago that you don't even need anymore. And they're just still stuck on their form because someone approved the form at that time. And
I'll take it one step further, Jody. You then have to fax it.
To mind and drives me crazy.
You have to fill out these forms and then you have to fax them to them. I don't know why doctor's offices, they have like MRI machines and a fax machine. I don't get that, but
yeah, I know.
That's a different podcast.
Sidebar.
Maybe.
Yes. Yeah. Different conversation.
Sidebar. Are you sure you don't have a law degree?
I don't have a law degree. I did like the law library a lot. I studied there. It was right across from where I lived and across from the business school. It was the best library on campus.
So, Eric, we touched about this, and I've talked about this a lot in writing and on this show, is, in my personal opinion, the number one cybersecurity threat with AI right now is deepfakes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love to get your perspective, because I've come around to the view, and I recommend this to clients, particularly publicly traded ones, that you need to have a very specific response plan for a deep fake, because your response is going to be in minutes and hours, not days. And love to get your thoughts about how you think about, well, now what if, this deep fake appears of our CEO saying stuff in the media, no doubt, that are completely false, but yet it goes viral and now we're flat-footed.
So I think, I think your question reflects two really fundamental sides of the same coin. One is the security piece of how do we manage this, and the other is a communications piece and a reputation piece, and the two are certainly integrated. I think the thing that I worry about is that we're just always playing catch up, and I think in the way we use AI, I've talked about it as a strategic thought partner. I think we can be really proactive, and I think that's really forward facing. I do think on the threat piece, it always feels like we're at least a half step behind, because the people who use it for bad purposes are highly motivated and highly talented in how to exploit the technology. And by the way, I can imagine a world where the AI advises bad actors on, what are the ways to get, somebody to turn over their credit card information as quickly as possible, or a CFO or a treasurer to wire money. And I don't have a good answer for that other than we continue to be vigilant and just, make sure that we're never more than a half step behind on that. But I think it's the magnitude and the scope of the risk has certainly changed geometrically based on these technologies.
So, Eric, I would love to just ask, we always ask our personal privacy and security tip, and we're still going to ask that. But we have a lot of attorneys who listen to this.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could tell them one action item today, not a personal privacy or security tip, but just based on our conversation, what would you recommend that they do after listening to this conversation?
I would say so a lot of people will take an email they've drafted or a memo and put it into a tool and say, help polish this up. I would take it a step further and say, take an issue you're wrestling with and put that into an AI tool. And to the point we were discussing before about prompt engineering, give it a lot of context. Share your thoughts, share what you're worried about, what are you trying to figure out, and see what you get back. And I think that could be a really engaging and exciting first step. I think people don't know how to use it or are afraid to use it or have overestimated the complexity of prompt engineering. I would say start. And I write about this in one of the articles. We had a mediation we were preparing for, and I said to our outside counsel, let's just put everything into Harvey and see what it says. The motions, the mediation memo, and then just stream of consciousness. Here's what we think is going to happen. Here's what we're worried they're going to say. Here's what we're trying to get out of it. And we didn't get some eureka moment out of that. I just want to be clear. We didn't slap our foreheads in amazement. But what we got was an extremely thoughtful set of insights that shaped our strategy and how we thought about it. And I think that's really the potential of AI. And I think people that think that, it's going to become managing partner of the firm and there won't be any lawyers anymore, I'm not worried about that. But I think what we should worry about is missing out on a really valuable input. So one of the articles is called The Third Voice in the Room. And I think that's the way we ought to be seeing AI. We constantly talk about the value of having diverse perspectives around the table when we have a meeting, when we're strategizing. I always say, if one of the people you could invite to the meeting had access to all human knowledge, wouldn't you want them in the meeting and be curious what they had to say? Doesn't mean you listen to them. Doesn't mean you wouldn't say, that's an interesting point. That's not quite it. Which, by the way, we all say now. There's always that person in the meeting who's got some wild ideas. Okay. Turns out there are dumb ideas. I think engaging with AI as a thought partner, as a third voice in the room is a great place to start. And once I think you start to see the richness of the inputs and the pattern recognitions that it sees that you may not, it becomes really quite exciting as a tool that amplifies our decision-making process. It doesn't replace it, but it amplifies it.
Now you have to answer what your best personal privacy or security tip is. You have to give 2 tips on our show today.
So it is the ultimate analog solution. And it is on our team. We have a code word. It's like pomegranate. It's not pomegranate, but this is like pomegranate. It is a fruit. And we use that as a way of validating our communications. So it's a way of me signaling that something's really important and I need everybody to read it right away. It's also when there's a security threat, because who doesn't wonder whether the email saying there's a security threat is itself a security threat? And so when I send an email or anybody else on the team sends an email with that word in the subject line, we know that it's legitimate. And somebody might one day learn what that word is and we're screwed. But for the moment, it is a really, really terrifically analog way of validating our communications. And there's something even just kind of fun about it, and sort of in some ways at least feeling like maybe you've outsmarted technology by going as far in the other direction as possible. So it works. It works.
I like it.
So what do you like to do for fun when you're not thinking and writing about AI?
I love reading. I am an irresponsible and promiscuous buyer of books. They're scattered around my house, many unopened. I just really enjoy reading, and I enjoy reading online. I enjoy magazines a lot, but I'm really just like I said, an irresponsible book buyer. And my other thing is I love going out to eat, and I believe that a tasting menu, a multi-course tasting menu with wine pairings, is the height of civilization. I think that's the pinnacle of our civilized world, is to have some fabulous multi-course meal prepared by a chef with a sommelier who comes and tells you what wines have been perfectly paired with each course. And if you're sitting with your spouse, your partner, your friends, having a great conversation, to me, that's the whole thing to me. It's my happy
That sounds amazing. And I love magazines too. Actually, having worked at Cox for a very, very long time, I have strong appreciation for the printed concept. There's a space for digital, but I actually much prefer a magazine so I can flip and see it.
There is something, a glossy magazine. I used to, when I started out in New York, and you had a lunch hour, I would go to a newsstand and read magazines, particularly foreign magazines, that are, often didn't know the language, but the photographs were fabulous and glossy. And of course, in a classic New York moment, I was doing that, and the guy who ran the shop said, "Hey, we're not a library." So, but some of those magazines are expensive. So, that was the workaround.
Amazing. Well, Eric, if people would like to connect with you, where is the best place for them to go?
Eric.Greenberg at CMG, as in coxmediagroup.com. We're on LinkedIn. I'm certainly active on LinkedIn, and you can DM me, and I look forward to connecting with people. One of the great things about this series, including the two of you, has been engaging with people in really kind of rich ways. So I welcome it.
Well, thank you so much. We are delighted that you were able to join us today.
I was delighted to do it, and thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check us out on LinkedIn. See you next time.